Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Above the Bar podcast, where each week we belly up to the bar with a new guest, find out what they do, who they are, and what makes them great. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Alrighty, folks, it's your host, Sean. We're back on the Above the Bar podcast. We're bellowing up here for it's the first Wednesday in March already. And for those of you that haven't paid attention to it, I know that Groundhog made the comment about we're going to have a longer winter or something like that. But if you're anywhere near the upstate New York area where I'm at, we're already hearing the geese coming back. We can hear them coming through. Somebody said they saw Robin the other day. And I'm going to say we're going to have an early spring. And if we're going to have an early spring, we might as well, have one of those cities that I'm going to tell you, if you've never been to it, it's worth it to go during the summer. And we can have a phenomenal representative of it, someone who knows the area around there and is going to tell us about where all the creepy crawlies, all the vampires are hiding at throughout there and all these different things. So joining us from the city of, are you still in the city of brotherly love?
And sisterly affection.
Oh, I didn't see. I've never heard that one. So joining us today, it's Miss Joanne, and I'm going to probably butcher your last name because that's what I do, Joanne McLaughlin.
Close enough.
Was that close enough? I mean, it's good enough.
It's McLaughlin. Just think of lock, a key and a lock.
That's it. I mean, look, I'm a Murphy. Right. We just butcher names. That's what I'm really good at. So Joanne's joining us tonight. We're going to be talking about her experiences with writing, leading writers, which I really am very curious of, because that's got to be like dealing with all kinds of personalities. But the most important thing is we're going to talk about her books, what she's written. I love vampire stuff. I'm curious about if she's got any Anne Rice influence on these, because I'm a big Anne Rice fan personally. But before we get into all that, let's go ahead and take care of the house cleaning here. Over my right shoulder is the big board for Sticker and a Cause. If you've got something you believe in, something you're supporting, maybe you wrote a book, you have a podcast or a band, whatever it happens to be, you can reach out to us on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok. Our website is theabovethebarpodcast.com. Even our email is theabovethebarpodcast@gmail.com. Reach out. Let me know what you got going on. I'll let you know where to send your sticker to, and we'll read about you live here on the air so all the world can know about what you got going on. As always, folks, that's Sticker and a Cause. Now, we got to talk about the people around here that pay the bills, and that's Budget Blinds of East Greenbush, Hudson and Coxsackie, and Schoharie, North America's largest custom window treatment company. They handle everything from blinds, shades, shutters, tint, you name it. They've got it all going on. They can handle it. You get a free in-home consultation. Joanne, have you ever bought custom window treatments before?
I have. I bought them from Budget Blinds.
Are you serious? Looks like you get an extra bar. Well, then let me ask this question then. Did they come out to your house?
They did.
And they measured it all?
Oh, yeah.
Did you have to pay for any of that?
Well, I paid for the blinds.
You paid for blinds, but you didn't have to
Beyond
pay.
anything else, not to my knowledge, no.
And they showed you how everything looks against your decor.
It was pretty simple. I mean, I got white on top of white, but yes, they were very good. They were very good. I was very pleased. I continue to be very pleased.
That's what I'd like to hear. And listen, if you're up in the capital region and you're looking for window treatments, make sure you're reaching out to Budget Blinds of East Greenbush, Hudson and Coxsackie, and Schoharie. And for the month of March, just for the month of March, folks, they're doing buy 2 window treatments, get 1 free. So you listen, if you've never bought custom window treatments, you have no idea how good of a deal that really is. And as always, if you tell them that you're there to belly up to the bar, they're going to give you an additional discount. This month, it's another 5% off of your order. So that's Budget Blinds of East Greenbush, Budget Blinds of Hudson and Coxsackie, and Budget Blinds of Schoharie. They've got a window treatment for every budget. All right, Joanne, it's done. All the house cleaning is over. All that stuff's done with. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Stupendous as always.
Okay.
See, you can't not smile when somebody says stupendous. Have you ever noticed that?
I think that's true. Yes.
It's a very difficult word. And I think you're pretty stupendous. So let's start here. Let's start at the beginning, because that's always the best place to start at.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get my notes up for a second, because, I spent some time in the Philadelphia area. I know if Nate pops up, you can just put this in your head. Nate's going to ask you what's your favorite place to get a cheesesteak at. No, he's going to ask it. That's just the way Nate
He'll be disappointed.
You're not what? You're a vegetarian?
No, I'm just not a cheesesteak person.
But because the pork sandwich, you like pork sandwich better, right?
No, I'm not much of a meat person, frankly.
Oh, okay.
I'm a vegetarian, but I'm not a big meat person. I will confess.
Okay. So let's see here. You started telling superhero stories in second grade, writing stage plays. Which Catholic school did you go to down in Philly?
I went to St. Martin of Tours.
Oh, I don't think I've ever heard of that one.
It's right on Oxford Circle in Northeast Philadelphia. It's like almost literally on the circle. Right
there in the heart of it. But so you started off there, had some. Now we were talking about this beforehand. You actually, I thought. Now, have you won awards for your writing?
No, I have the way it works in newspapers and radio news and things like that. is that basically the editors or the producers. I was an editor for many years. And so you're working with a staff of reporters and you're developing the story. You know, you talk back and forth about where you think the story is going. Obviously, if it's breaking news, you sort of consult on where the story ought to go, you know, in terms of, okay, we should try this and we should try that and we should try the other thing. We should tap the source. We should look at these documents. So whenever you're the editor, you're the person behind the curtain, so to speak.
All right. So, but you've led some folks that were Pulitzer Prize nominees. Did I understand that right?
Yes.
What was the other award? It was Pulitzer Prize, and there was another one
a Peabody Award, which is a big broadcast award.
So you've led some pretty impressive teams there as far as that type of writing.
I think so. And they've won a lot of regional awards, very impressive in their own right, but those were sort of national awards.
So I'm impressed by any type of leadership stuff. I'm always impressed by that because I couldn't imagine what leading those types of personalities, because writing, what was it? I always use the big thing. Was it the Chicago Tribune used to have the sign that said, even if your mother tells you she loves you, check your sources.
That's right.
So you're dealing with those type of personalities, constantly having to go back and forth with them. But as you're going through that process and you're doing this, when do you start writing for you?
I've always written for me.
Okay.
I started out in journalism as a reporter because, nobody wakes up one morning and says, gee, I'd really like to be an editor. That doesn't happen. It's like,
it's not part of the process.
You want to be a doctor, you want to be a fireman, you want to be a veterinarian, maybe you want to be a bartender. But very few people wake up one day and say, oh, gee, I want to be an editor. Not when they're little. So, I started writing. I've always been a writer. I've always been a storyteller. But at a certain point, I think, you realize, where do my talents lie? And when I got out of journalism school, I won't say how long ago it was, but there were a whole lot more newspapers. And it was sort of in the wave that followed Watergate, when everybody wanted to be Woodward and Bernstein.
Gotcha.
So there were.
I think I could be. I'm not going to. No, I couldn't be. I couldn't be Deep Throat. I can't.
But so at a certain point, it's like, okay, am I going to be another Woodward and Bernstein? Is that the best use of my time and my talents as I go forward in my career? And I decided, no, it wasn't. And I became an editor. And I'm pretty good with working with people. I mean, none of them hate me. They're still talking to me. I'm still talking to people for whom I was an editor like 40 years ago.
So, something positive came out of it. None of them hate you. That's a good thing.
Well, not as far as I can tell, or they're doing a really good job of hiding it.
Well, hey, listen, as long as they're hiding it, that's all that matters. They still talk to you as long. A friend of mine was just telling me this. They say this about this with my personality. Like, when you meet me, you either love me and realize like I should probably be your best friend forever, or you never want to talk to me again. Like I don't have an in between. I don't know what that's like, and it can be tough. But it sounds to me like you figured out how to manage these people and manage these folks. But were you like when I look at some of your writing here, and I'll make sure I got the different stuff here. So you got your novels like Chasing Ashes.
Mm-hmm.
You have your the vampire trilogy. Am I missing any books? I know I can go into
The new one.
Oh, the Poetic Puzzle.
A Poetic Puzzle, which is coming up backwards on my screen, but maybe not on yours.
Yeah, nevermore. Well, what I was looking at, and then you have Anne's Guide to Time Travel.
Right. I was a contributor to that. I contributed a story to that.
And look, folks, if you're just joining Joanne and I, and you've got questions about writing or about where to find her books, you can always check out Joanne McLaughlin, and that's McLaughlin.net, and you can see what she's got going on there. But ask questions right now. Maybe you're looking to write a book, or you've got that book hiding. Everybody tells me I should finish mine. I'll never finish mine, Joanne.
Oh, you can finish it.
You know what it is? I'm done in my head,
Mm-hmm.
and that's my problem. Like when you write, let me ask that question, because this has always been my issue. And I'm always curious of different writers' processes. Like I've listened to some of these professional writers, and they're like, I dedicate 20 minutes a day. I have to write this amount of words, and then I don't touch it. And then you run into guys like the one who wrote all the ones with the Iron Throne, the dragon stories. I can't think of the name.
Yeah, I know who you mean.
You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, yeah, I wrote like 5 pages and then couldn't touch it for another 6 months, and then I finished 7 books. Like, I don't know, like, what is your process, or how do you work with people, especially since you had to manage people that might have had that writer's block or that mindset?
Well, somebody, and this was not me, I read this somewhere, I don't know how many years ago, said that writer's block is not ideas can't get in, it's ideas can't get out. Okay, so it's a head thing. Everything's a head thing, right? Football's a head thing. J.R.R. Martin.
Thank you, Ann. I appreciate that, because I couldn't remember.
I couldn't think of his name either. But anyway, when you're dealing with journalists, that's a little different. They got a deadline, or even if it's not a hard deadline, the story's not doing an hour, the story might be doing 4 days. So, you talk to them, you massage them, you play psychologist, you play consultant, you do whatever you can, to say, okay, have you tried this person? What if we move these paragraphs around? You do what you can. For me, my process is so bizarre. I have been the person who's written like 150 words and then walked away for 5 days. Believe me, I've been that person. I've had books that have poured out of me. I wrote the first draft for my current novel, the one that just came out February 1st, A Poetic Puzzle. I wrote it in 4 weeks.
The whole book?
I wrote the first draft.
Oh, okay.
First draft, but it was like close to 70,000 words, maybe.
Dang.
And I wrote the first draft in 4 weeks. Now, I had a kind of a personal deadline, because it was coming in a point, I was about to take over babysitting full time for my younger grandchild. Oh. And I had this 4-month window. And I just sat down one day and said, I'm going to do this book. And this, I had an idea in my head, and I just wrote it, and it just came out. Other books have taken forever. My book, Chasing Ashes, is based on some of the characters appeared in a book I wrote when I was in my 20s. Oh, a book that was never published because it was terrible. It was just terrible. I look back, and the book sat in a box under my desk. It moved from state to state and house to house for many decades. And then when I finally figured out the story I wanted to tell with these characters, it still took, like another 3 or 4 years to get done. It's, the process is the process.
Now you kind of brought something. Now you brought something up with the process piece, where you said those characters were in a book that you didn't care for after it was done, or you didn't feel like it was good enough to be published. When you're creating these, and I mean, you've got several different books here, you've been involved with other books. Because again, I've read a lot of Anne Rice. Back in the day when I used to deploy, you just You didn't have a cell phone that you could scroll through.
Right.
You read books, and then the guy next, he was like, dude, you should read this. Read this. For those who don't know it, most military guys, at least from my generation, are pretty well read. We've read a lot of books. That's what we did. But when you were doing this, did you ever have in your mind, or was it one of these things you wanted to avoid, where all this is a shared universe? Like, are all your books in the same world, or are they standalone, kind of their own part of a multiverse?
Well, with the multiverse, yes. With the exception of the vampire novels, my other two novels are published novels are standalones. I mean, the vampire novels had a common universe. I mean, that's what storytelling is, right? You're creating a universe. It doesn't have to be out in the stars or in the cosmos. You know, I created a dysfunctional family of vampires. That is the sort of headline of my 3 vampire novels. And yes, I was very much influenced by Anne Rice. I loved her early vampire books. I didn't so much love some of the later ones.
Well, did you like when you say the later ones? Like, obviously, we all love Lestat and Interview. Like,
I love the first 3. Like Interview with the Vampire, Lestat, and Queen of the Damned. The rest of them, I wasn't nuts about.
So you didn't love. See, now I love. See, we're gonna left turn for a minute, folks. I love. I wish I watch all the AMC series now. Very into it, but I want them to figure out how to bring in the Body Snatcher.
Okay, I read that book. I read some of the early Mayfair Witches.
Oh yes. You ever read Servant of the Bone?
I don't remember.
So that's
I have to check my Goodreads.
That's like a great.
I don't think so.
It's a standalone, but it's like in the Anne Rice vein.
Right.
I'll give you the basics of it. It's about a guy who gets sacrificed in ancient Egypt by having gold poured all over his body and being encased in it.
This sounds familiar.
And he can't go anywhere.
Right.
So he ends up dying in it, but then they melt it down even further so that his spirit is trapped in these golden bones. And then they get passed from people, and it's about him being trapped in those bones. Oh, it's very good.
And let me just say that I'm sort of one of those people who reads in a lot of genres. I write in a lot of genres. And when I say I wasn't nuts about them, I guess I get tired of some things. I mean, I think I certainly did that when I was younger. I've read all of the Louise Penny books right now. And there are like 20 of them. I've read all of those and I love them. But I'm a quirky reader.
But you know what? It brings up a great point that I'm always very curious of when it comes to readers and writers. And we've had a lot of different writers on it. And look, folks, as we're going through this, I'm going to say it again. If you're curious about what Joanne's got going on, JoanneMcLaughlin.net, McLaughlin. You can see what she's got going on. Or if you have questions, please ask your questions so she can answer them. But as a writer, especially with the way writing has changed, where today a writer can say, man, I got this great idea. I want to write a vampire book about, homeless vampires that each one of them only has one tooth, something ridiculous. I can drop it into Chat GPT right now and it'll write me a book. How do you feel as a writer and somebody who goes through those things with the way writing has gone? How do you feel about things like that?
Well, I can't imagine asking Chat GPT to do anything for me. I have said for many years, I have damn few talents. This I can do. I can cook, but I don't enjoy it. I can't sew to save my life. I'm not a big sports person. I mean, walking is like my speed. This I can do, and I'm not going to let any damn computer take it away from me.
Do you still type like on a typewriter then? Like, I'm curious.
No, I'm
just curious.
I use a laptop. There are times, of course, when I am scribbling things on a little legal pad. In fact, I was scribbling something about a chapter I'm working on before we logged in here together. There you go.
I'm with you. I need a pad of paper by me at all points in time.
Well, I think my calendars have calendars and my pads have pads at this point. That's how many things I have sitting, because this is where I work. This part of my dining room table is where I work. And I can't imagine doing it by letting a computer do it for me. I just can't.
I get it completely. So tell me a little bit about then, as we've got Poetic Puzzle that just came out.
Right.
Where can that be found if somebody was interested in finding that?
It can be found on all the basic online outlets for sure. I mean, it's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble. It's probably on Walmart and Target and all those places too.com. You can get it on bookshop.org if you're inclined to do that sort of thing. So it's pretty much everywhere right now. Ebook, on Smashwords and stuff like that. It's it's for sale through the 8th. On Smashwords. I don't remember off the top of my head what the price is, but it and Chasing Ashes are available as ebooks on Smashwords at a discount, for the next couple of days. I
love the tagline of it personally for Poetic Puzzle, a mystery in 32 pieces. Is it 32 chapters in the book?
Yes. Yes. Ding, 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 ding. You got it.
All right. I was gonna, I'm pretty bright. That's why my dad called me son. Yeah.
Well, part of the reason, frankly, why we did that was because my publisher was having a conversation with some people and mentioned this and said, "Oh, is it a puzzle?" I was like, "No, it's a book. It looks like a book." She was showing them the book cover, and so I thought, okay, let's put the tagline on there. This way, there can be no doubt.
I got to go back to this for a second. Like I'm. And listen, folks, you can read about, I'll read this real quick. Internationally acclaimed poet Mary Irene Jones has vanished. Calls and texts unacknowledged, bank accounts empty, car abandoned. But before she disappeared, she mailed never published manuscripts to a lesser known namesake poet, M. Irene Mimi Jones. Are the manuscripts clues only Mimi can decipher? And what about the handsome Philadelphia cop assigned to the case? He seems as intrigued by Mimi as by the missing celebrity poet. Talk about a person of interest. But again, I love reoccurring characters. I'm a bit I'll tell you another writer that I love is and I love it when I do this, Dean R. Koontz. I still say it as Dean R. because that's what all of his books were when I first started reading. But he was very rarely would he bring a character over to a new book. It was a very rare thing for him. Have you fallen in, let me ask this question. Have you fallen in love with Mimi? That Mimi gets to come back in another book? I know this one just got published.
I'm working on another Mimi book.
All right. So Mimi's back.
Pray. I'm about not quite 50,000 words into it. So I've got a good chunk of it written, but this is the first draft. And, you have to allow yourself permission to write really bad stuff because good stuff comes out of the really bad stuff, right?
That's interesting.
That's not original with me either. The notion of, if I may say this, the notion of shitty first draft is not original with me at all. Anne Lamott, poet and writer, Anne Lamott said, give yourself permission to write shitty first drafts. That's what you need to do, Sean. That's how you get the book out of your head.
Well, you know what? You've said something twice now that I find very intriguing. I think most writers that I've ever had on always talk about, well, I wrote the first chapter. I wrote the first 7 chapters or whatever along those lines. You speak in words. Well, the first draft was 70,000 words. Hey, I think I'm just about done this. I've got 50,000 words. Mm-hmm. Does that come from your editor background that you're focused more on the words because you can only fit so much on a paper kind of thing?
Well, no. In the publishing industry, I mean, certain genres, like a standard, what they call literary fiction is only going to be like 60 to 80,000 words. I mean, really, the real doorstop books don't happen very often anymore, the way they used to. I mean, maybe some publishers do, I don't know. But for instance, my first vampire book is about twice the size of A Poetic Puzzle in terms of length. I mean, I can't remember the word count off the top of my head, but the story is the story. It's like every once in a while you'll be asked to maybe add a little bit more because you have to. Most books are print on demand these days.
Yes.
Right. And so when a book is formatted, they want to have so many pages. You need an even number of pages or a number of pages divided by 4. In newspapers, they used to call it balancing the press. Okay. That you would have sections, and every section would need to be the number of pages divided by 4, pretty much, which is why you would never get like back in the old school real print newspaper. That's why you wouldn't necessarily get a page that's just pulled out of the middle, a single page. That's why everything looked like this.
I guess I never put that together.
Yeah. So, I mean, but most of the time the story is the story. And you kind of get used to a rhythm to it. And the draft of this was not, the first draft of A Poetic Puzzle was not substantially different from the final length of it. I think I added 2 chapters maybe.
Oh, wow.
At the request of the various people who read the book, my editors, and also my beta readers, people who read various versions of the book along the way and said, okay, I'm not sure that this makes sense. Can we tie up, this question in a little bow more neatly? I want to hear from this character more. And then, so I think altogether I added 2 extra chapters before it was published.
Oh, wow. I mean, in the grand scheme, that's not a lot. You're just really kind of, like you said, you're cleaning things up. You're putting things back together. Interesting. Now,
like a puzzle.
Like a puzzle.
Every book is a puzzle. Trust me.
Now, and if I'm all over the place, this is the squirrel brain that I have. And as you say things, I'm like, ooh, I wonder. Because listen, it's like talking at a bar. Now, this is something that to me is super important with characters. Mm-hmm. And I see it sometimes with actors and actresses, the great ability to do this. But in print, I always have felt that it's a little more difficult to do. How do you make people give a shit about a character? Because I think that's one of the most difficult things in writing.
Yes, I agree. I think the answer for me, and I can always only answer for me, is there has to be something authentic about the character. And I know authentic is one of those words that gets, tossed around a lot these days, but there has to be something of the writer in the character or of the writer's experience in the character. For instance, in A Poetic Puzzle, one example, Mimi is rather afraid of dogs. I am rather afraid of dogs. So she's a little like me in that regard.
Okay.
The character of her mother, and I'm not giving anything away here. The character of her mother, today I should say, would have been my mother's 96th birthday.
Well, happy birthday.
I miss her. But every single time I wrote a line coming out of Mimi's mother's mouth, it was my mother's voice in my head saying it. And I think those are the things, if you can somehow try to translate that reality, that authenticity of a character, even if it's a little tiny bit of it, onto a page, that's how you make readers care.
I like it. So it's really pulling out of you what you think people care about you and like about you, and then translating it into the character almost.
Well, but also something universal, a woman and her mother, a single woman and her mother, a mother who is going to look at her and say, are you really wearing that? That sort of thing. that's something a lot of people, even men, can relate to, right?
Yes.
Is that I love you, but really, are you going to wear that? That sort of thing.
That's what we're wearing today.
And I think that kind of tiny thread of universal experience is what makes a character authentic. It's a little bit more difficult sometimes if you're writing about a vampire or if you're writing about an alien, obviously, but you have to find the humanity in the alien, so to speak.
Well, you brought the vampire up for a second. Mm-hmm. So that's the other thing that I'm always curious about writing. And I've in what I've got done, I wrote a pretty dark scene, and I was almost like, I've enjoyed writing this too much because it was pretty dark. When for yourself, writing this many books, writing murder mystery type stories, vampires, there's going to be darkness in there. It has to be. It's kind of part of the genres to these things. Does it ever concern you as a person? Like, where am I drawing this darkness from, and then translating it for others to read?
No, because let me say this. My vampires are not. They're not like Hammer movie vampires. They're not killing for the sake of. They don't kill, for one thing, because when you think about it logically, what use is your prey, for want of a better word, if you're a vampire, if you kill them? Because then they don't pump blood anymore. They don't provide food anymore. It's like setting fire to your cornfield.
Okay, all right. That's an interesting way of looking at it. That's a first. I get it, though. I get it. Listen, I get it. There's a great vampire movie where like the world figures out that there's vampires, and then everyone wants to be a vampire so they can live forever. So people that aren't vampires get put into like almost cattle blood banks so that they can stay alive.
Okay. Yes, I think I know that.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
I can't. Yeah, but I think I've seen that. God only knows what the title is. But I kind of look at my vampire. Like I said, it's a dysfunctional vampire family, but that dysfunctional vampire set exists within a very self-sustaining ecosystem. It's like figure a hospital show where you have all these different characters, an ensemble people. Everybody's got a role, right? So if you made all the doctors vampires, or some of the doctors vampires, and maybe the anesthetist and the nurse and the cardiologist are not vampires, but they're operating with the vampires, it's a self-sustaining ecosystem.
Yeah.
So that's how I looked at it. And I think that's how I prevented it from being dark. There's a lot of sex in the vampire books. Yeah, but there's not a lot of violence. There's a little bit of violence, but not that much. The most violent scene I've ever written in my life is in Chasing Ashes.
Which I was looking at that earlier today. And again, folks, if you're curious of these books and you're like, why am I not reading this? Because that's what I'm going to ask you is, why aren't you reading them? Again, check out Joanne McLaughlin.net, McLaughlin.net. And you can see all of her books. She's got them all there. She's got any events, clips. You can see the Vampires of the Court of Cruelty series. You can see about that. You can see about Chasing Ashes. I like that somebody wrote McLaughlin's novel triumphs in its ability to make us care deeply about the people chasing the truth and the ashes of their past. That's a pretty awesome line. That sounds pretty doggone good. So we got to go back to the vampires for a second.
Okay.
Just again, this is the way my brain works. When do you think we went from vampires being like super scary, like Nosferatu, like 7-foot long fingers and all these super scary, like, I don't want to be anywhere near this creature, to like now vampires are like Lestat, where they're like, going to bite your neck and make love to you. Like, when did we go from like this super scary, like, I don't want nothing to do with this vampire, to like, so just look into my eyes as I take you as my prey? Like, when did we change?
Well, I can't speak for the overall, industry of vampires. I'm not the official representative, but
right now you are. You are.
Okay, right now I am. All right. Okay, here's my take on it. I think vampires have always been about seduction.
Okay.
I mean, if you read Dracula, right, which is obviously not like any of my vampire books, but he's very seductive. Even though Vlad the Impaler, supposedly the model, was a warlike maniac, right, or a warring maniac. That's another issue. But I think the character of Dracula is obviously seductive in his way. I think we move toward that. Christopher Lee's vampires, were sexy in their own kind of weird way.
All right.
I mean, Christopher Lee is not a person I would have thought of as a sex symbol, but nobody asked me. I think of Frank Langella in the Dracula play, Broadway play.
Okay.
And then I think there was a movie of that also. He was pretty cute back then. I think we've come in that direction, very gradually. And that's what my books are about, certainly within the context of this dysfunctional family. The element of seduction runs through that. People want to be a part of this. Certainly, Charmaine Harris, who wrote all the Sookie Stackhouse, the True Blood vampire.
True Blood.
All about seduction.
Oh my God.
All about seduction. And I think it's always been that way to a certain extent. I think the whole idea of the villagers with the torches and the garlic and the crucifixes, you could argue, if you wanted to, that it's the old time morality. It's the old time Catholic Church in the Middle Ages, or Protestant Church in the Middle Ages, rebelling against what they saw as the licentious sexual nature of the vampires.
All right. I mean, we got the biting of the neck, all those things going on. All right.
The body, feasting on the body, as sort of the opposite of feasting on the body of Christ. Yes, it's Ash Wednesday. Please forgive me.
Oh God, I didn't even think that's
sacrilegious to someone here. I don't mean to be offensive. I'm just speaking, sort of intellectually here.
Well, what's completely left turn for a second. Did you ever watch the series Lore? Lore?
No.
You ever get a chance, watch it, and they actually tell you where the lore of vampires comes from.
So what is it on? Like a History Channel type thing?
It was like it was a Sci-Fi Channel or something like that.
Okay.
If somebody's watching, can look it up. It was and tell us the series Lore, Lore.
Right.
But it actually gets into the history of vampires, and it actually goes back to like a plague. And I'm going to screw this whole thing up because I'm just trying to remember it. But it had something to do with like a plague that was going around, people dying, and then because of whatever it was, the way the plague was, people were like, "Oh no, it's something else demonic that's happening here," and something to do with it. They would go back to the bodies, and the body was still warm after the death. So they're like, see, they're still warm a couple of days later. They're actually demons that are going to get up and drink your blood. So they got into this whole thing where you got to drive a stake through its heart so it can't get up. But it actually had nothing to do with today as we think of like Vlad the Impaler and all that when the books were written. But it was, she actually, not Shelley wrote Frankenstein. Who was it wrote the original Dracula?
Bram Stoker. But they say that he had probably read an article on this. There it is. And you're absolutely amazing right now. I'm going to tell you that. Let's see if I can get it to get your thing. Yes, TV series Lore. Oh, there you go.
So, and you are absolutely amazing. Lore TV.
Okay.
Vampire. But yeah, you have to check that one out because it tells like this entirely different thing. It was actually the one of the first episodes. It was called They Made a Tonic. But it gets into this whole thing about where they all came from. Completely sidebar. I'm sorry. I was just thinking about that. So getting back into the writing piece and about writing all these different books. So just had the gosh, I almost said just puzzle pieces. I almost jack that whole thing up. So
A Poetic Puzzle.
A Poetic Puzzle. I almost just said, because I was thinking about the 32 pieces in my head. So, so you write Poetic Puzzle. How long after that's done do you? Yeah, Nathan said it was a good show. See, I told you Nathan was going to be here sooner or later. Nathan, you're going to be very disappointed in a moment. But so you get into this and you write Poetic Puzzle. How long after that finishes? Because you said you had like, hey, the newest Peanut was coming. You had plans to do all these things. How long after that do you get the bug again to start writing?
I'm trying to think. I was finishing work on subsequent drafts of A Poetic Puzzle as we were editing the final product on Chasing Ashes at the end of 2023, I guess. I had written the first draft of A Poetic Puzzle in the spring and summer of 2022.
Okay.
And so I started the book I'm currently working on now, which, as I said, God willing, and the creek don't rise, will be the second Mimi Jones book. I started working on that maybe this time last year.
Oh, wow.
And I kind of got a little delayed because I broke my shoulder right before Memorial Day weekend.
How did you break your shoulder?
How did I break my shoulder? I was walking in the neighborhood. When I was babysitting my granddaughter, we went out like every day when it was above 40 degrees. We were out in the stroller and we walked all around the neighborhood. As you may know, Philadelphia is an old city with a lot of old trees and a lot of raised sidewalks.
Yes.
I knew where all those raised sidewalks were. What I did that was one day I had a very old pair of sneakers on. This was last May, and it had some, the rubber that's on the edge of the sneaker. And this is the only thing I can figure out is I clipped a tiny piece of raised sidewalk with that, went down on my knee, went over my shoulder, and my shoulder went. So anyway, all good. I sat on the sidewalk. I had my cell phone with me. I was able to. I'm right-handed. My cell phone was in my left-hand pocket. I was able to lever myself up somehow to get the phone. I called 911. They said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm sitting in the middle of the sidewalk. I'm about here. I'm between these two streets." I mean, I knew exactly where I was. I was conscious. I was fine. They came and got me. They took me to the hospital. Okay. But needless to say, 11 weeks in a sling, yes, maybe I could have dictated the story. But I was too distracted by pain and just general orneriness and feeling like crap. So I didn't get back to writing it again, say maybe toward the end of the summer. And so
see that's impressive to me. Just the fact that you're like this is, it was almost like it was your therapy getting back to writing to get back in that groove. It's your motivation to keep going.
It wasn't a very deep groove, I should tell you that. It was a very shallow groove at first.
And real quick, folks, we're getting pretty close to closing the bar here and everything. And when we get ready, we've got to talk about one of our other sponsors, and that's New Scotland Spirits. If you're looking for a spirit that's as bold and as rich as New York history, New Scotland Spirits is crafting exceptional locally sourced whiskey that tells the story with every sip. From grain to glass, we honor tradition while pushing the boundaries of flavor. Whether you're a whiskey connoisseur or getting started, there's a bottle waiting for you. Raise your glass, a true craftsmanship. Find New Scotland Spirits near you or visit newscotlandspirits.com to learn more. New Scotland Spirits, where history and flavor meet. It's actually what I'm drinking right now is New Scotland Spirits. So, and Nate, I'm definitely going to ask your question because you threw me a curveball. I like it. What are some of the advice that you would give as an experienced writer, as someone who's done everything from the journalism side to it, to, the novel side to it? What is some of the advice that you would give to somebody who maybe is writing a book or considering even, hey, I got an idea? What's some of the things you would tell them?
Well, I think if you have an idea and you feel comfortable about writing it down, write it down. Take a look at it. I started Never Before Noon with, as I said, the words dysfunctional vampire family. I also had the title. I wanted to call it Never Before Noon because that was the name of my then late husband. My husband had just died when I started it. That was the name of his music management company. So I thought, okay, Never Before Noon. And some friend of his had once said, well, musicians, they never get up before noon. Right.
I get it. It makes perfect sense.
Right? So I thought, okay, dysfunctional vampire family, musicians. I just started and I thought, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I opened up his laptop because mine was an old crappy Windows Vista model. You remember those back in the day?
Yes.
And opened it up and I thought, okay, what can I write about that goes with Never Before Noon and a dysfunctional vampire family? And I just started writing. I wrote a line that said, all my nightmares end like this, no matter how they begin. That's the first line of that book. And then I just started to write. And about, I want to say it was about 4 months, 3 months, maybe. No, 4 months. When we got to the point where we were going to have a memorial service for him. Well, we had a memorial, but we were going to cast his ashes into the Lehigh River. How's that? And I ambushed my poor mother. God rest your soul again, Mom. Happy birthday. And I handed it to her on the Northeast Extension and said, here, read these pages. And she read about, 20 pages. And she looked at me and she said, is there any more? I said, I think so. And she said, okay, let me see them when you're done. And that's how that book came to be, which is all a long way of saying, try it out, set it down, write down, even if you have like random goofy thoughts, just write them down, put them on a pad, stick them on, open a file, a Word document, and just do it and keep doing it. And maybe something happens to it. Maybe it doesn't. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying everybody can do this in a way that maybe I can, or maybe even the way Sean can if he ever writes this book. But
I've got 5 chapters.
If you don't try, you don't try, you don't win, right?
Yeah, I've got the 5 chapters.
There you go.
They're written, but I'm telling you, like in my head, I have 3 books already done. They're absolutely amazing. The movie's great. I've watched the movie in my head so many times.
You know who's going to star in it, right?
We could at this point, who knows who's going to star in it? I mean, but it's all done. I'm hoping for like a cameo similar to like a Stephen King, like pop in where like I'm just serving coffee or something like that. I don't care. Like it doesn't make any sense why I'm even there. Just squeeze me in. But so I hear you on that just do it mindset. Is there anything that then on the other side that you would say are pitfalls that either you learned as you were writing or from watching other writers that we were managing at that time where you were like, you know what, and I'm not talking about like cocaine and booze. I'm talking like,
writerly stuff.
Like, I mean, listen, if you could do a couple of bumps and write 3 books, I mean, that's on you, but
it doesn't happen. Well, I think and this is true if you're a reporter, it's true if you're writing memoirs, it's true if you're writing nonfiction, it's true if you're writing fiction. Every story has a beginning, it has an end, and it has a middle. The beginning is that kind of idea that you think is very compelling. If you think it's compelling enough to write it down, could be somebody else is going to think it's compelling. You have to believe that somebody else is going to think it's compelling, right? Okay. And the conclusion of that process is either the solving of the mystery, the resolution of the romance, the conclusion of the story, the breaking news story, insofar as like the plane has crashed. We know how many people are dead. What we don't know is what caused it. That would be the conclusion coming. What's hard is the middle. The middle is where you tell the story. And you're laying in little bits of information as you go. The little things like Mimi's afraid of dogs. The little things like my vampires are in a rock band. You start layering in details, as you go. That's how you write the story. In journalism, when you're covering a breaking news story, especially right now when everything is online, the first thing you might write is a 3-paragraph news brief. And then what happens is, if you take a single news story, something non-political, just something, basic, and you look at it, what you're going to see is they're going to write, like the first couple of graphs are going to be all information. just the facts. And then they're going to start giving you information. The plane crash occurred in Northeast Philadelphia in a neighborhood that's very populated. It happened at a time of day when there's a lot. This just recently happened.
Yeah. I actually know. Right. It was funny. I was like, wait a second, I know this story.
Yeah, you've heard of this, right? It's near a shopping center. People were there. People were on the street. The debris field was hard. And you're going to see the graph by graph by graph by graph by graph, paragraph that is. It's going to get built. The middle is what gets built. And it's the layering in of detail. It's the layering in of personality. You're building a world. There's a lot of discussion about world building in science fiction and horror and fantasy. Oh, yeah. But in every story, you're building a world. You're telling people who the characters are. You're giving people the setting. You're giving people the context in which the action occurs. It was a Friday afternoon. It was a rainy day. It was misty. It was cold. People were rushing home from work. That's the context. You're talking about the perspective that people were. I was a commuter. I was just going home. I walked out my door and boom, suddenly there's a big ball of flame. This is how you build the story. Is it a pitfall? Yeah, sometimes it's an absolute gaping crater because you can't figure, if you're writing fiction, you can't figure out what goes in that space. That's your job, is to figure out what goes in that space in the middle. And that is really hard. That's the hardest thing of all, I think.
Now you brought up another thing, and this is why I find writing so fascinating to me, is the other side to it is I know you said you have notepads, your notepads have notepads. Mm-hmm. Do you write like, hey, Joe Smith is a plumber who lives here, and do you write down about your characters so that you have almost a bio of them? So
I don't, but I know a lot of people who do.
Okay. Because I'm curious about that. Like, because that was one thing that was said to me on mine. They were like, you've changed, like, it's not, there's no continuity, but I'm like, yeah, it is. I remember it, but I don't, like, I can't go back.
At a certain point, somewhere you've got a catalog in your head. Right. In my vampire books, in my first vampire book, because the vampires are a prog rock band, okay. The Court of Cruelty is a rock band.
Okay. Prog, I love it.
Prog rock, right? They're like into the whole Renaissance thing and blah blah blah. Their events, their weekend long concert events are called the Peasants Fairs, and their fans are called the Vassals. But anyway, I finally created a discography so I could keep track of the songs and the albums. I was like throwing in these names out of the blue into this book, and I couldn't keep track of them anymore.
So you had to go back and put it together.
And the thing that made me realize I needed to do this was because I went through a whole chapter when I kept calling the Cult of Cruelty instead of the Court of Cruelty. And I had to go back and change everything. And I'm like, okay, this we need to be organized about.
That's interesting. Now, because you were calling it cult, did you ever consider like, well, maybe I'll just change it to cult instead of
because it was all the medieval thing,
Gotcha.
Everything, the family home is called the castle. It's just like it was the shtick.
Gotcha. Look, folks, for those of you that are still with us here, if you're curious what Joanne's got going on, you want to know more about what she has happening. Again, Joanne McLaughlin, McLaughlin.net. If you've got questions for Joanne, let us know right now. Nate does I told you Nate was going to have a food related question for you. I love me some Nate here, but he changed it up on us a little bit. Okay. I thought he was going to ask you about cheesesteaks or something, but I like this. Nate wants to know, what is your go-to snack to help motivate you to finish your book? Like, do you have something like you need to have like ice cream and chips or like anything like that to like kind of pump you up?
Yes, and I've got a couple of things.
Okay.
I have to say that when I was writing the vampire books, as I said, my husband had just died. I ate a lot of French bread pizza, Stouffer's French bread pizza. Because I'd sit down and I'd write like at 4 o'clock on a Saturday. And then, I'd stop at 8 o'clock and I'd have a French bread pizza and I'd go watch an hour of television. When I was writing, Orphan Black had just come on.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, that series had just started. So I'd go and I'd sit there and watch Orphan Black and I'd eat my French bread pizza and then I'd go write for another couple of more hours. Right now, I eat a lot of popcorn.
All right.
Skinny pop, as low sodium and low calorie as I can get it, but I eat that. And I have to say, I've become a real sucker for vanilla bean ice cream lately.
Oh, listen, I wish I could remember the name of the one we just found up here in Albany.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they refer to it as old fashioned vanilla because I love a good Philly vanilla
Mm-hmm.
personally, but it actually like their vanilla, this old fashioned one, tastes like frozen whipped cream.
Oh, cool.
Like
That does sound good.
it's
I'll have to
ridiculous.
go back to upstate New York. I worked in upstate New York for
Where
2
were you?
I worked in Middletown, New York for 2 years.
I know right where Middletown is, and Middletown's not really upstate.
Well, it's Mid-Hudson.
Yeah,
Well,
that's the weird thing.
New York City, isn't everything upstate from New York City?
Oh God, unless you're in Yonkers, which you think you're in New York City, but then New York City says no, you're Yonkers, you're not New York City. But Yonkers just wants to be New York City with all of its heart. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you live in the Albany area, you don't consider yourself as really upstate, your capital region.
Right.
And then you're like, dude, like you can still end up in Plattsburgh. That's like Canada.
That's upstate.
That's like real up. But that's even there, when you go up there, they're like, no, we're the Champlain Valley. Like we're Lake Champlain. We're different. None of them really want to call themselves upstate. But I digress here for a minute. So all right, popcorn, little. I like. Listen, when you were saying the French bread pizza. I like pepperoni cups. A good pizza with pepperoni cups on it. You know what I'm talking about when I say pepperoni cups?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I love
I'm not a big pepperoni person, but I'm not a big sausage person for whatever reason, even though I'm half Italian and I grew up in a family of people who made their own sausage.
See? Well, listen, here, complete sidebar for you folks. If you don't know this about Philly, you want to have an amazing whole hog roast, South Philly will do a whole hog, and it's some of the best whole hog you'll ever have in your entire life. I don't know if you've ever had that from down that way, but you can get like a whole roasted pig in South Philly still to this day. You know, find some South Philly Willie. They'll tell you where to go, and they still do it. And I'm pretty impressed by it.
I'm a Northeast Philly girl. What can I say?
I know. I get you. Philly's like Baltimore. Like, I always thought of Philly like Baltimore in the sense of like, this is the neighborhood you grew up in. You may have gone outside of it, but for the most part, that's where you stayed. You didn't really like. I grew up in Dundalk. We went into Highlandtown or the Inner Harbor, but I really didn't like. I didn't go over to Germantown. I wasn't in Pikesville. Those just weren't areas that I went to because I had no reason to go there. Like everything was right where I needed it, right here in Dundalk. So why do I need to go anywhere else?
Well, I moved around a lot, a lot. For the first few years of my career, I had like 5 jobs in 6 years.
Oh, wow.
Which is what you did
That's
back
a writer's thing, though, isn't it?
That's what you did in newspapers back then. So I worked in Middletown, New York. I worked in Akron, Ohio. I'd leave Philadelphia, I'd come back. I'd leave Philadelphia, and I'd come back. So right now I'm in Northwest Philadelphia, which the other side.
My hint just said my Uncle Jack and Uncle Jake and a few friends used to do whole pig roast when they were young.
There you go.
I can only imagine what them parties were like. He knew how to play.
One of my best friends was the daughter of a pig farmer. Is the daughter of a pig farmer. He's now deceased. Whose dad used to be the head of the Pennsylvania Pork Producers Association.
People don't realize. Well, Pennsylvania is just like we could have a whole show on Pennsylvania. People don't realize.
You go to Penn State, you meet people.
Yeah. But people don't realize like Pennsylvania. If you're in Philly, has nothing to do with when you get to cold cracker country and they're all Eastern Europeans, or you're in Amish country, which is a completely different animal than being down in York, which is nothing more than a suburb of Baltimore. And you're out in Western PA, which is like as country bumpkin as it gets. But if you're in Northern PA, you're right there on Lake Erie. It's like ignorant snow and everything else. Like PA is a whole nother. There's a reason they call it Pennsylvania. There's a reason, folks. Well, look, folks, I have to tell you, Joan, this was absolutely a pleasure. I had such a great time. Look, folks, again, if you want to know what Joanne has going on, JoanneMcLaughlin.net. You can find everything she's got. Any upcoming speaking engagements, anywhere else where people can find you?
Well, yeah, I'm going to be signing some books at the Barnes & Noble in Plymouth meeting on Saturday. we're going to be doing an event in a couple of weeks, a multi-author event at the Jenkintown Library in suburban Philly. And I'm going to be doing a table at the Skippack Book Festival in Skippack, Montgomery County. Also a suburb of Philly. He's laughing because he used to work in suburban Philly.
All these neighborhoods that you're like Plymouth Meeting Mall,
right, exactly.
Skippack, exactly. Jenkintown. We used to say nothing good ever come out of Levittown.
That's not true.
That was the line.
The Pulitzer Prize winning architecture critic, who I used to edit, although not the year she won the Pulitzer, is from Levittown, New York, Inga Saffron. So there you go.
That used to be the line. Nothing good ever came out of Levittown.
Well, you know.
That used to be the line. Oh, that's just so great. Joanne, you have no idea. You have brought back amazing memories, taught me some things today. Absolutely a pleasure.
Good things, I hope. And likewise, it's been great.
Absolutely. Look, there's a little chubby kid that lives in my soul that has a dear spot for Philadelphia food. After 20 years in the Marine Corps, when I got to Philadelphia, it was kind of like I can eat right again. Like they eat they can eat like I eat. So I was definitely happy with all that. So, well, look, folks, again, if you're finding Joanne through me or me through Joanne, make sure you like, share, follow. She's got a huge presence on Instagram, LinkedIn. You can see what she's got going on. All your social media is on your website, isn't it?
If it's not, it should be.
It should be. I know it's all on here.
Yeah.
I love all these books.
And if it's not, I'm easy enough to find. Google me.
Google her. She's very Googleable. Is that a word?
Googleable.
I don't know how you do that. Googleable. Yeah, I think it's under contacts. I think that's where I saw it. Nope, that's your email address stuff. But go ahead and Google her. You'll find her. You can find all her books. Everybody should buy at least 20 copies of each book, yes, so that you can give them away as Christmas gifts and everything else. But that all being said, make sure you join us again next week. We have Scott Waldman. Gosh, my tongue's tied around my eye teeth and can't see what I'm saying here. Scott's going to be on. Scott is a musician, music manager. We're going to talk about the world of music, how to get into music, his more recent album. So I always like talking to musicians also, anyone creative. I just like creative stuff. So make sure you join us next week as we're talking to Scott. As we do this every week, and I know, Joanne, you've binged everything we have, and I say this every week, you've binged over 270 episodes of the Above the Bar podcast. I know you're fully immersed in this world, and don't log off on me afterwards. We got to talk for just a minute, but I'll remind you, the guest always gets the final word in every episode. So what's the final word for tonight?
Read a lot.
Alrighty, folks, be sure to push your stool in. This has been a Second Front podcast presentation found on Apple, Spotify, and wherever podcasts can be found.